It arrived like a lightning bolt from an unexpected sky, one single explosive swing that seemed to suspend time itself and send a collective shiver through the hearts of millions. The racket strings met the ball with a crack that echoed far beyond the hard courts of Miami, and in that frozen instant, 50 million souls scattered across the globe appeared to stop breathing in unison. Alexandra Eala didn't just strike the ball on that sweltering afternoon in 2025. She unleashed a thunderclap that cracked open the guarded gates of tennis history and forced the entire sport to rewrite its assumptions about where greatness could emerge from. No algorithm had predicted it. No veteran commentator had circled her name in bold ink as the next disruptor. It was raw, visceral instinct fused with years of buried hunger and quiet defiance, all converging in one perfect, destiny-laden frame. When the ball left her strings and rocketed toward its target with merciless precision, the stadium fell into an eerie, breathless hush, as if the world itself needed a moment to process what had just unfolded. Then the eruption came, a deafening, primal roar that rolled like a wave from the stands, through living rooms in Manila, sports bars in distant cities, and glowing screens in offices and homes from Asia to the Americas. Every timeless legend, after all, is born in such an unforeseen instant, an instant that no one sees approaching until it has already redrawn the map of what is possible. Her journey toward that immortal swing had never been scripted for fairy tale ease or inherited spotlight. Alexandra Eala, born in Quezon City in the vibrant heart of the Philippines, entered the world without the cushion of tennis aristocracy or the golden keys that unlock elite pathways. She was not the daughter of champions, nor did she grow up gliding across the immaculate grass of storied European clubs or the perfectly conditioned hard courts of exclusive Florida academies, where private coaches fine-tuned every gesture and sponsors hovered like eager guardians of the next prodigy. Instead, her story kindled in the humid, resilient soil of a nation where tennis lingered as a soft, almost ethereal dream rather than a thundering cultural force. In the Philippines, where basketball arenas pulsed with electric passion, boxing rings carried the weight of national pride, and volleyball courts united communities in spirited rivalry, a young girl choosing a solitary racket sport often meant embracing long stretches of quiet struggle, modest facilities, and the subtle skepticism that a sport with so few local heroes could ever deliver global glory. From a tender age, Eala gripped her racket not merely as equipment, but as a lifeline and a declaration, a vessel carrying the unspoken hopes of her family, the quiet dignity of her neighborhood, and the latent aspirations of an entire archipelago hungry for a figure who could stand tall on the world stage. Every grueling training session under the relentless tropical sun, on courts where the surface bore scars from years of use and the nets sometimes drooped like weary shoulders, transformed into an act of profound rebellion. She drilled forehands until her arms ached and backhands until her legs burned, all while the paint on the lines faded and the balls lost their bounce far too soon. While privileged juniors in Europe competed beneath bright lights with cheering galleries and endorsement contracts already shaping their futures, Eala pushed forward in relative obscurity, her only consistent companions the rhythm of her own breathing and the unyielding voice inside her that refused to accept limits drawn by geography or circumstance. Nobody hailed her as a chosen one in those early years. No flood of scouts descended with promises of stardom. She was simply the focused, determined girl from Manila whose game carried an uncommon depth, an urgency in her footwork, a fierce intelligence in her shot selection, and a hunger that seemed to intensify rather than diminish with every setback. Yet the victories, when they finally began to surface, arrived like carefully placed stones forming the base of something enduring. Local tournaments surrendered first, followed by regional triumphs that hinted at broader potential. Then came bolder conquests on the international junior circuit, where she started turning heads not through flashy pedigree or hype, but through a style of play that blended elegant athleticism with raw, unrelenting competitive fire. By her late teens, she was already navigating professional waters with a maturity that belied her years, treating each match as more than points on a scoreboard, as a platform to amplify voices that had long gone unheard in the grand theaters of tennis. For Eala, the sport had always transcended mere competition. It represented a powerful megaphone, a canvas upon which she could paint stories of resilience, and a bridge capable of connecting her homeland to the farthest corners of the globe. She played with the awareness that every hard-fought point carried the potential to inspire countless young dreamers in places where resources were scarce, but ambition burned brightly. When she finally earned her place on the main WTA tour, she had already evolved beyond the label of promising talent. She had become a living emblem of possibility, the tangible proof that ferocious self-belief, paired with disciplined sacrifice, could dismantle even the most formidable barriers of circumstance. The tennis establishment took note of her technical gifts and her tireless work ethic, offering measured respect, yet the wider world remained in a state of patient, somewhat skeptical anticipation. They sensed potential, but they were still waiting for that singular, electrifying catalyst, the moment when admiration would ignite into worldwide fascination and cultural phenomenon. That catalyst exploded into existence during the 2025 Miami Open, a prestigious WTA 1000 event where the Florida sun beat down mercilessly and the stakes felt as heavy as any Grand Slam. Eala entered as a wildcard, relatively unknown to the casual fan, her ranking hovering outside the elite circle. The draw was unforgiving, littered with seeded powerhouses and battle-hardened veterans. Yet she advanced with a surgeon's precision and a storm's unstoppable momentum, dispatching opponents who had once seemed insurmountable. Round by round, her confidence swelled, her movement grew sharper, and her shot-making revealed layers of brilliance that had been quietly honed in those humble Philippine courts. Then in the quarterfinals, the tennis gods placed before her what many considered an insurmountable test. Iga Swiatek, the formidable Polish world beater, a multiple Grand Slam champion whose dominance had cast a long shadow over the tour, a player whose elegance masked a ruthless efficiency that had dismantled nearly every challenger placed in her path. The narrative had been composed long before the first ball was tossed into the air. Commentators and analysts leaned into the familiar script: too soon for the young wildcard, too steep a climb against a champion whose trajectory had seemed ordained from her earliest days. Swiatek stepped onto the court radiating the quiet authority of someone accustomed to dictating terms. Early exchanges appeared to validate the prediction as she broke serve with clinical poise, her footwork covering the court like a well-oiled machine and her ground strokes landing with punishing accuracy. The sun glinted off the hard surface, the crowd hummed with anticipation, and for a fleeting stretch it seemed the established order would hold firm. But deep within Eala stirred something ancient and unbreakable. A refusal forged in countless solitary hours of training, in the echoes of doubt she had learned to silence, and in the collective pride of a nation watching from afar. She clawed her way back into her service games through grueling deuces that tested every ounce of mental fortitude, producing returns that seemed to bend the limits of reaction time and court geometry. The atmosphere in the stadium shifted palpably. Murmurs grew into sustained applause as spectators recognized they were witnessing something authentic and rare. The first set slipped away to Swiatek, yet Eala had already etched her presence into the match. She belonged at this altitude, she could trade blows with the best, and she could make even the most dominant champion feel the heat of genuine resistance. The second set elevated the contest into the realm of epic theater. Rallies stretched into marathons of 20, 30, even 40 shots, each exchange a masterclass in endurance, tactical intelligence, and sheer willpower. Serves exploded across the net at velocities climbing toward 140 miles per hour, while defensive retrieves turned into offensive weapons. Both athletes pushed themselves to the outer edges of their physical and emotional reserves, sweat glistening under the relentless sun as the crowd leaned forward, captivated. Eala forced a tiebreak, and by then the digital world had awakened in force. Streaming numbers skyrocketed as millions upon millions tuned in from every time zone, drawn by the electric tension radiating through their screens. Something profound was unfolding, not just a tennis match but a living story of defiance against expectation. The third and deciding set became the emotional crescendo, a primal battlefield where only conviction and composure could prevail. Games remained locked in a tense equilibrium, each point carrying the gravity of an entire season. The stadium descended into reverent silence during rallies, only to erupt in cathartic release when a winner finally landed. Social media platforms across continents lit up with trending hashtags, live reactions, and shared disbelief. In bustling streets and quiet homes throughout the Philippines, families gathered around whatever screens they could find, hearts synchronized in collective hope. Viewers in Europe, the Americas, Australia, and beyond, who had perhaps never before invested emotional energy in a match involving a Filipino player, found themselves unable to turn away. The tension thickened until it felt almost tangible, like a living entity hovering over the court. Then at the most pressurized crossroads, when analytics and experience heavily favored the Polish champion, and momentum seemed on the verge of swinging decisively, the moment that would etch itself into tennis lore materialized. Swiatek unleashed a formidable serve clocked at 134 miles per hour, targeted with surgical intent toward Eala's backhand wing, crafted to restrict options and force a passive reply. It was a delivery refined through thousands of repetitions, her signature instrument of control. But Eala had anticipated it with an almost prescient clarity, her body coiling like a tightly wound spring loaded with years of unseen preparation. Her eyes locked onto the incoming ball with the focused intensity of a predator in its final approach. The return detonated off her racket like a controlled explosion, traveling at 93 miles per hour, yet carrying far more than raw speed. The placement was exquisite, the trajectory merciless, the angle unforgiving. The ball kissed the line with mathematical perfection, landing exactly where even the slightest deviation would have rendered it harmless or given Swiatek a window to counter. The champion barely had time to register the shot before it had already whistled past her, leaving her rooted in stunned silence. It wasn't a traditional ace, yet it carried the same devastating, match-altering finality. The stadium exploded in a symphony of astonishment and joy. 50 million viewers worldwide rose from their seats or leaned closer to their devices in unified shock and elation. In the vibrant streets of Manila, strangers hugged and cheered as if celebrating a personal victory. Sports bars from bustling metropolises to quiet suburbs erupted in roars so thunderous they drowned conversations and drew curious glances from passers-by. Social platforms buckled momentarily under the avalanche of replays, analyses, memes, and emotional outpourings. That one return didn't merely secure a point or shift a set, it shattered psychological barriers and seized the global narrative in an iron grip. Eala went on to close out the set and the match, advancing deeper into the tournament in what became a history-making semifinal run. In doing so, she became the first player from the Philippines to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal, the first to defeat multiple top 10 players in a single event as a wildcard, and the catalyst that propelled her into the WTA Top 100 for the first time. Within hours, the clip of that thunderous return circulated endlessly, dissected by biomechanics experts, celebrated by tennis legends like Serena Williams and others who offered sincere tributes, and replayed on every major sports network interrupting regular programming. Brands that had rarely turned their gaze toward Southeast Asian athletes suddenly competed for her attention. Her image graced magazine covers and digital campaigns. Back home, schools wove her story into lessons on perseverance, politicians basked in the reflected national pride, and a new generation of children reached for rackets with fresh dreams sparkling in their eyes. Restaurants displayed her photo, neighborhoods buzzed with conversations about her journey, and the ripple extended far beyond tennis, into conversations about representation, opportunity, and the power of belief to transcend borders. Yet no meteoric ascent escapes the gravitational pull of scrutiny. As the initial euphoria crested like a brilliant wave, the inevitable undertow of skepticism and backlash gathered strength. Doubters emerged from various corners, questioning whether the performance represented sustainable excellence or merely a luminous but fleeting outlier. Some European analysts suggested that one extraordinary tournament, however dazzling, did not automatically redefine a player's long-term ceiling. Others scrutinized the sudden surge of corporate interest, labeling sponsorship deals and media attention as potentially manufactured hype rather than organic recognition. When Eala encountered a difficult but contextually understandable loss in a subsequent match against strong competition under challenging conditions, the online chorus intensified. Declarations of fluke, accusations of overhyping, and assertions that reality had finally reasserted itself. The psychological burden was immense and multifaceted. It was no longer simply the pressure of winning points under stadium lights, but the heavier weight of suddenly embodying hope and symbolism for millions. She faced not only athletic challenges but also the examination of her every move as a cultural figure. In response, Eala demonstrated the quiet steel that separates transient sensations from those destined for longevity. She withdrew temporarily from the relentless glare of public commentary, silenced the external noise as best she could, and returned with renewed discipline to the fundamentals that had carried her this far. She analyzed her performances with clinical honesty, treating setbacks not as indictments of her worth but as detailed blueprints for refinement. She trained with even greater intensity, studied tactical nuances more deeply, and reinforced the mental habits that turned pressure into fuel. Because she understood, perhaps better than most, that true greatness is never defined by a handful of shining moments alone. It is forged, layer by layer, in the thousands of unseen hours on cracked courts, in the solitary battles against doubt, and in the unwavering commitment to evolve even when the world's eyes are no longer fixed so brightly upon you. And so the story of Alexandra Eala continues its unfolding chapters, still being written with every serve, every rally, and every act of resilient grace on courts around the world. From her breakthrough in Miami that launched her into the upper echelons of the rankings, through subsequent milestones like reaching tour finals, claiming titles at the WTA 125 level, and etching her name as the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA history, She has already proven that one defiant swing can ignite a movement. That single afternoon in 2025, that one perfect, history-altering connection of racket and ball, had irrevocably altered the landscape of the sport. It served as living evidence that sometimes the most transformative revolutions begin not with inherited privilege or fanfare, but with the steadfast heartbeat of a young woman from the Philippines, who dared to swing with enough conviction that the entire world was finally compelled to stop, watch, and believe.